Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is such a cozy space, so I'm really thrilled to be here today. My name is Mari Bel. Thank you. I'm a singer songwriter, and I'm going to talk today about my album that I released maybe a bit over a year ago, year and a half ago. It's called Encuentro. I have it here so that you could see it. It's called Encuentro, a tribute to Cuban jazz. So it was recorded in Cuba. I was living there for almost 5 years before I moved here to New York about a year and a half ago. So the whole inspiration of the album is really linked to my experience of living in Cuba. I'm actually originally from Belgium, so I'm not Cuban. It's kind of random. I've lived in a lot of places around the world, and so that's kind of part of my creative process as well. Is that I speak a lot of different languages. So these languages, I use them every day. So they're in my head, in my thoughts, and like even in my dreams, I dream in like several languages. So the album has 4 languages, and some of the songs actually have several languages in the same song. Not because I want to like show off my language skills, but just because in my brain things work. Some thoughts go in different languages, like depending on the day or the person I'm talking to, or the topic of the song I wanted to do. Like I chose that kind of like, for me, that would be then the right language to do that song in. Um, Cuba was an incredible experience in terms of music. It was not incredible in terms of some other things that you might imagine, the difficulties of living in such a place. But music was the reason why I was there, and the music scene is incredible. The level of the musicians are like New York scene kind of level. Um, their music though is very Cuban. I mean, they're quite an isolated island, so they don't get that much influence from abroad, but they're extremely good at what they do in their Cuban. Well, in my case, I'm a jazz musician, so like Cuban jazz is incredible. It's like Afro-Cuban. They have a lot of different styles. But the level is so good that I really wanted to learn from that and take something away as well, as I was preparing to leave, because I was there for the pandemic. It was a really hard time. And so as I was preparing the next move, I wanted to record this album. I already recorded an album there in 2018, which were cover songs. But then when the pandemic hit, I started writing my own songs and music. And I wanted to just make sure I would take that from the island, take it outside of the island, and make sure I have like all the kind of influences I've had experienced over those years, to record it and to kind of have something to memorize it, to make sure it wasn't lost. The pandemic was a really special time in Cuba. They closed down like everything for a year and a half, like all live music, bars and restaurants. So basically what I did, all the musicians were doing nothing, literally. They were all available. So over the years, I had met a lot of musicians. I was hosting some weekly jam sessions at my place there. So over the years, I had like really developed a huge network in the Cuban jazz scene. So when the pandemic hit, I started writing music, and I decided to just call everyone that I'd met over the years and be like, okay, let's do something, because the only thing we could do was basically record, because the studios were running, but nothing else was open. So the whole album has this special kind of feel about, we were all there in that pandemic, going through harsh times. And some of the songs are also kind of inspired by that isolation, in a way, of being very far away also from my family. There were like no flights for like a year. So before the pandemic, I was always kind of flying in and out of Cuba, and then suddenly I was stuck on this island. And it also made me realize how some Cubans actually live, because many of them can't travel, and so I suddenly started feeling like as trapped, maybe in a way, as some of these people are feeling. So the creative process of the album. So I recorded with more than 50 musicians of the Cuban jazz scene, which was a huge logistical challenge, actually, to get everyone there recording in the studio. So I did every song with a different kind of band. I wrote the songs, and then I would call someone I would really like as a musician to make the arrangement for the song, and then record that song with his or her band, to just get a lot of different styles. You know, it's a very eclectic album, I would say. It's on purpose, you know, because people were kind of like, "What's your red line? Like, what's your how do you say that in English? Like, fil rouge." You're a French speaker. Fil rouge, like like a guideline throughout. You know, when you're producing an album, people want there's to be some kind of coherence in the project. And so I would say, like, my actual project is that it's not really coherent. Like, I really want every song to be completely different. I want every song with a different band, to hear their style in that song reflected, and also different rhythms, because Cuba has a lot of different rhythms. We can like have salsa, rumba, son. I did some bossa nova stuff because I'm really big into Brazilian music. Well, and actually the Cubans are also into Brazilian music. So there's a lot of different styles on the album, and I wanted it to be that way. And so I then just basically called everyone to record, and it ended up being this huge, like as a producer as well, a huge challenge really to have all these different people in the studio. And yeah. And so the song, there's 11 songs on the album. 9 of them are written by myself, and 2 of them are friends, Cuban musicians who wrote them for the album. And the song I'm gonna be performing is actually quite a typical song of the album. It's kind of the most quiet and calm and intimate song. It's like right in the middle of the album. It's on track 6 out of 11, and it's kind of the song that slows down the album. Like the album starts with actually a song that's a mix of samba with timba, which is a sort of a Cuban salsa genre. So it kind of opens really strongly the album, and you want to be dancing, and there's a lot of songs on the album that make you want to dance. But then the song I'm going to be performing is kind of that song right in the middle of the album when people just kind of want to slow it down, because music lovers like you actually still listen to a full album like as if it were a book, right? Like because you're not going to read a book just opening one chapter at the end and read it. So as we all appreciate music, we listen to an album from the start to the end. And so this song was made in the order was important. I just wanted to sing this song to like people to kind of just slow down and introspect, because the whole process was also a lot about pandemic, getting back to yourself. So the song that I'm going to be performing is called Encuentros, which is actually the name of the album. It's Spanish for encounters, and it's really about all the encounters of the different people I had there in Cuba over the years, but also in general, like the way the pandemic made us realize that how important human contacts are, and suddenly we were there like by ourselves, and this song is really about how valuable any type of human encounter could be. It's the lyrics are in Spanish in this song, but it's about I can just kind of like give a fast translation for people who don't understand Spanish. So it's basically the song is saying that whether it's having a coffee with someone, or like your first love, or like something like a really big encounter or a really small one, just laughing with someone randomly on the street, that these things are what makes life worth living. And that's what we realized in the pandemic, that we need those things really to be to feel like fulfilled. And so the chorus of the song says that I'm no longer looking for a sense in life or like a meaning in life, that I just realized that these encounters are what make life for me, worth living. And that I'm not like trying to make a philosophical search of, why am I here, or, but that these human encounters are what really brings meaning into my life. So that's what the song is about. The style of the song, the genre, or like the rhythm, it's a Cuban style called feeling. It's actually they say feeling. It's actually an English word, feeling, but they traduce it, they translate it into Cuban. They say feeling without the G at the end. And it's a genre that was invented by artists like Omar Portuondo, who was in Buena Vista Social Club, and kind of the older generation of Cuban artists. And it's a genre that's kind of between jazz and trova. Trova would be, in English, would kind of be like maybe singer-songwriter, you know, just like chanson, songs that someone would sing in a very intimate acoustic kind of way. So it's very little instrument. There are not a lot of instruments in the song. You'll hear it's a guitar-based song. So this style of music in Cuba is always guitar-based, and you'll hear the way the guitarists play is like he'll put very little chords, you know, like very kind of open, you know, and it's also meant to be sang. It's not to be meant to be sang like rhythmically. It's kind of meant to be free. As a singer, you're like, this is a genre you interpret. You would be singing kind of like you're telling a story to people, and you don't have to like be on the beat. You can just kind of talk through the song. Then you're also gonna hear on the song. So today, unfortunately, I don't have a band with me, so it's gonna be my first time performing. I kind of feel naked, you know, because I'm gonna be performing with a backing track of the actual album. But you're gonna be hearing an amazing trumpet player, Cuban jazz artist called Jacek Manzano, who's just an incredible trumpet player. So you're gonna hear as well a lot of trumpet on the song and a beautiful solo in the middle. But otherwise, you're gonna hear it's like a very intimate, open song, like very little noise, you know. Whereas other songs of the album, if you're interested in listening to it, it's on Bandcamp. I also brought some albums today if anyone still has a reader at home for CDs and is interested in supporting, you can get one from me. So the contrast with other songs of the album who could be seen kind of like loud because it's, you know, salsa or it's something kind of heavy. This song is gonna feel like we're all kind of taking a break from, you know, craziness. So I think I'll just be performing the song and then we can talk about it and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Oh, we'll have to unlock the light. It's okay. I can talk about my album for hours and days. So, you know, when you make an album, like that was, I don't know how many of you have your own album out, but when I did my cover album in 2018, it was obviously a great experience to get studio experience and everything, but it wasn't the same feeling as actually having your album out with your own music. Like to me, it was like the most incredible day of my life. Like when my album was ready, I felt like I had given birth to a child. Like seriously, I don't have children, but this is how I imagine people having a children, because it's like you produced something that didn't exist. You know, you produced music or songs that didn't exist before, and it's like you're giving something to the world or something that you're so proud of and that you want to talk about for like days, you know. Like I can annoy people talking about my album for like hours, just like people love their children and show it to everyone and, you know, think they're all beautiful. So that's how I feel about my album. Your computer was okay. Yeah, okay, let's do it.
Tomar un café cortado, conversar con invitados, un olor a miel, el color de tu piel, encontrarse con amigos, reír con desconocidos, el primer amor, recordar tu sabor. Estoy agradecida por los encuentros que la vida me regala. los sentimientos que me da. Ya no busco el sentido de existir en este mundo, porque son los encuentros los que me hacen vivir, porque son los encuentros los que me hacen vivir. Estoy agradecida por los encuentros que la vida me regala, los sentimientos que me da. Ya no busco el sentido de existir en este mundo, porque son los encuentros los que me hacen vivir, porque son los encuentros los que me hacen vivir. Son los encuentros, son los encuentros, son los encuentros los que me hacen vivir. Son los encuentros, los encuentros.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Did anyone get the lyrics in Spanish or no one? Some of you? Okay, great. Yeah, the chorus says estoy agradecida, like how like grateful I am for like all these encounters. Yeah, that make us live. Okay. Any questions about this song or about the album or music in Cuba or music in New York? Actually, my day job. Yeah, I had a job with the embassy, the Belgian embassy in Cuba. But you know, I kind of like went there for music. But it's really hard to live there as a foreigner if you're not in some kind of other job. Like, I think it wouldn't be even possible to go live there as a musician, because you know it's a special kind of country. So I kind of used as the excuse of my day job to to be there and like spend as much time doing music as possible. And the pandemic was in that way like kind of a gift, because suddenly also work was kind of, I mean, not non-existent, but at least slowed down a lot. So I like spent a year, you know, working on this and not really doing much on my day job. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a good one. A lot, because their whole concept of kind of society is different, you know. And one interesting thing is that, well, first of all, everyone wants to be a musician there, which is kind of not the, like, for example, parents want their children to be musicians because it's kind of like a job that would actually make you better off in Cuba. It makes, like, if you're good at music, you'll be like touring and you'll actually have more income than like a doctor or a lawyer. So that was interesting to see how, you know, music was valued a lot by everyone. Like, you know, you could hear, you're kind of like, I'm a musician, and people will be like, yeah, what's your real job? You know, like, what do you do to actually pay your rent? Whereas there, it's like being a musician is really valuable. And then I learned, I mean, music wise, you know, the influences are huge because they have so many different rhythms. Actually, most of the Latin rhythms, they invented it. Cha cha cha, mambo, salsa, son, you know, what else? Rumba, like they invented, they're like the basis of really Latin music. So that was amazing to be there and, you know, learn from them about all these rhythms. The interesting thing also is that jazz, they don't study jazz, so they're incredible jazz musicians, and they don't have a jazz program in their schools. So they all study music from when they're 8 years old. They're like extremely like rigorous and well educated in music, but they'll all study classical music, and then so they go into jazz kind of learning by themselves. And that's really interesting to me, how they could be so good with like kind of being just on YouTube and whatever they can find as an influence from abroad. And they like integrate all these Cuban rhythms into their jazz as well, which I thought was really interesting. And then a last thing maybe on how different they are from the music scene here is that people don't pay rent there. Like, so people are not really interested in, people have time to just go to jam sessions and like rehearse for hours. So people would come to my house to this weekly jam session because there weren't really any like public places where they could do that. So they would like to come to my house and jam. But in New York, you can't do that because I mean, I would love to host a jam session, but people don't show up because they're working, because they have to pay the rent. Musicians get like $100 a gig here, right? Which is nothing compared to the rent that they have to pay. So people won't take time to rehearse. People don't do jam, like just people go to jam sessions maybe in Small's jazz club to like mingle with other musicians, and like when they're studying jazz, they like want to go and get that experience. But people won't go to your house and just be like, oh yeah, like let's spend our whole Sunday, you know, jamming and inventing music, you know. So that I really appreciated in Cuba. People just have so much time, and like it's nice because it's really about sharing the music, and it's valued, you know. It's not like, how much are you going to pay me for this rehearsal? When I was doing the album, we spent like hours, and with the people who arranged my songs, people who like were recording on the album, we spent hours and hours at my place. I would just give them food and drinks, and that was enough to just like create together and spend time together. And that, I really missed that when I moved to New York, because when I did a show here to present my album, it was like musicians are like, okay, so you said the rehearsal is 4 to 5. You know, at 5 p.m. they were like packing their bags, and we were like, wait, we're not done for the show. And they're like, yeah, well, you're paying us this much, so this is what we're gonna do. And so that was shocking to me, because for me, the whole thing about music is, you know, actually wanting to flow together and like have a result in a show that everyone likes, and, you know, get that energy, like that magic on stage. And like that was really a shock to me. Like I had to really adapt to the way the music scene functions here because of capitalism compared to communism, you know. I like here I would call people and say the show pays this much, and then people were like, yeah, we're not going to rehearse because you're not paying for the rehearsal. So I like wouldn't understand how you could do a show and just be reading someone's music without ever like having rehearsed it. Like in Cuba, no one would ever do that. People would call you and be like, Mari, we need to rehearse, you know, because we have a show, or like we're going to record your stuff, and this needs to sound like perfect, you know. So we all want to rehearse, just because of how financially, you know, the market works. And they're not worried about, you know, they're worried about many things, but not really about paying the rent. So that was an interesting change. Yeah. Did you have a question? No. No one? Yeah. So, yeah, so I speak more than they're on the album. So on the album is English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. And then my native language is Dutch, but I don't sing in Dutch because I don't think it sounds beautiful. That's, that's just me. I might one day record a song in Dutch, but like I don't really like it. And I speak some German, which I'm sorry if there's any Germans in the room. I also don't think it's a beautiful language for music. But some of the songs, actually, I think two or three of the songs have part of a song in. I think the first song has a part of it in it's in Spanish and the other one in Portuguese, because it's a samba mixed with Cuban salsa. And so the parts that are in the samba rhythm, I'm singing them in Portuguese, and then when we switch to the parts that sounds like salsa, I'll switch to Spanish. Kind of, I don't. It's not like people were asking me why, and it's just like in my head, it's normal. It's not like I kind of wanted to do that on purpose. It sounds more logical to me, for example, to sing samba in Portuguese and salsa in Spanish. Yeah, and then some French. Yeah, you can hear it on Bandcamp. It's open like to everyone on there. Yeah. Okay, so I think that most challenging was having so many people be part of the project, and you know I was working with a level of musicians that were like top. Like let's say it would kind of be like recording with the 50 best jazz musicians in New York. Like imagine trying to do that and trying to like get all these people actually show up, at the studio. Like I had to do a lot of logistics. Also in Cuba, people don't have cars or anything, so I had to like literally go, pick everyone up to like get to the studio. Because if you're telling them to show up by like public transportation, people just don't show up because they're like, I'm not gonna like wait for like 2 hours to take a bus for your thing. So like I had to do a lot of planning and logistics for that, and bring like drinks and food to the studio, and basically like just make it into this whole thing. I mean, of course, I paid everyone as well, who was on the album, but like you had to add all these logistical things. That was challenging to me because I wanted to be focusing on the music and the singing, and I was basically 90% of my time doing production things, making like calling people, making sure they were showing up. And there was some ego involved, I mean, also I'm as a woman, like culturally, it's not very common for a woman to be like a leader of this kind of project and basically to tell. I think on my album, unfortunately, like the majority are men. I mean, I tried to find some women, but it's just a reality that like the jazz scene in Cuba is very masculine. So maybe like 40 out of the 50 musicians at least are men, and they're all famous musicians. So there was a lot of ego there, where like, what's this girl kind of basically telling me what to play, or like to show up at that time at the studio, like who's she, right? I mean, some of them were friends and some of them, but still it was kind of accepting that I was leading this project for some people was hard, to like a foreigner who's a girl who's young, kind of young, because some of these people are like established musicians. I found that a challenge to like have authority, to be like really like, listen, it's great that you're participating, but I'm also paying you, and like we need to get something done, and this is how it's gonna go, kind of, to like have certain authority over the people who are on the project, especially if they're a million times better musicians than I am, right? So it's kind of like that was a challenge, yeah. For today, or yeah, it's samba. Yeah, because I'm in this phase where I'm into samba, because I'm also a dancer, and so I'm like training to dance in the Rio Carnival next year, and so I'm like training a lot of hours right now to like be able to dance, in that parade that they have going on in Brazil. And so the weather also, when the weather is nicer, like the samba just makes me like flow through the streets kind of, and I listen to it all the time, all day. So I'll be kind of sambaing like in the subway, and yeah, that's my genre. Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure, and thank you so much for hosting this event. Yeah.